Okay, welcome back everybody. If you could find your seats, please. We are ready for the spicy portion of the day. Want to thank Netris, our sponsor, our local sponsor, Netris, for sponsoring the sour bar outside. We'll see what kind of energy that gives everybody for the pain point session. But for those who haven't been here before, it's an open forum. It's okay to complain. It's okay to not know what the solution is, even if you're not technical. We just want to hear about issues that people are having in the industry, and someone in the room probably either has the answer or wants to work with you to try to figure out a solution to that problem. So we have 3 years running, I think now, our hosts of Pain Points. Please give them a big round of applause, Rick Herrera and Olga Ermolin.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay.
Woohoo. Hello. How's everybody? All right, a little liveliness here. I know we gave everybody some drinks, so hopefully everybody's enjoying that part. And as usual, it's us that stand between you and the happy hour and the next round of drinks. So we're going to do our best. Just a quick introduction. Olga here. Olga and I have known each other for a ton of years.
20 at least.
What was your first RESO event?
My first RESO event was Miami 2008. And I believe since then, for many years, we've been meeting in Chicago, and sometimes even 3 times a year, I think. So that was the beginning of my involvement with RESO. I think it was called REDS at the time, REDS standards.
And then how long have you been working with MLS, at an MLS?
Yes, I've been working at MLSListings for 20 years this year, but in many different roles. So it sounds a little better this way, I think. The one kind of common theme to all my roles over the last 20 years has been data, and data standards, and data quality, and data aggregation. We've done a lot of data shares with our neighbors. And data has always been part of my main responsibilities. And of course, that's how I got involved with REDS and Data Dictionary, and after that, RESO. How about you?
All right. So I mentioned this on a biz dev call earlier this month. It was October of 1999 when I started working my first job in real estate. So this actually would be my 25th year doing this, working with data. So I do often wonder, what am I doing with my life? It does happen. But yeah, so from a long time. So as far as the MLS side of the world, I think we have a ton of expertise here. I've been working with PropTech real estate data for quite a long time myself. And so hopefully we can be a good host, a good moderator, and we can guide us through this. I wanted to start off on a particular topic today. Normally we don't have a deck, but I did put together 3 or 4 slides on a particular topic that I thought was pretty interesting that we could kick off with. And that's really the whole concessions thing. Am I allowed to say that? I think I'm allowed to say that. But it was a ton of work. If you'd asked me, how much work is it going to be to change every single MLS you work with? We have over 500 data feeds that we work with. And by the way, you're going to have to do most of it in about a 2-week span. When the thought first came, it was quite daunting. It was very scary to me. I'll be really honest. It was a big deal. We put a lot of planning into it, a lot of thought around it. In the end, I think things came out okay, but there's kind of some good and some bad, and so I wanted to talk about that just to kind of start us off. I wanted to commend the vendors, the MLSs. I really thought the communication of all of the changes were coming out in advance. There was a surprise or two.
Yeah, for us it was actually quite smooth, but I'm not dealing with 500 feeds like you are, right? We only had to deal with our data share partners, and one of the good things that I think we've done was that we released everything a week before the deadline, and I think that helped, gave us a chance to work out if whatever, or give us a buffer to work through any possible issues. It was like a multi-stage rollout because we had to adapt our incoming feeds, our outgoing feeds, things like that. But at the end of the day, it went actually not bad for us.
So we had a lot of good communication. Trestle, FBS, Grid, really let us know exactly what fields were changing, what to expect, what the new field names would be. And so that was super helpful. We were able to get that stuff done in advance. That worked out really well. What was a little bit scary, a little troubling was for pretty much every MLS, we had data vanish, right? Obviously, the commissions piece had to go. And so alarms would sound. It would be like, overnight, beep, beep, beep. OK, so they've now removed the field. It's now gone because saturation rates go from a very high number to 0 overnight. That stuff definitely triggers something. We didn't always know when that was going to happen. That started happening probably 2 months out and then just slowly down until it was pretty much gone for about everybody. I'm going to show a little bit of what it looked like for us. So the first 2 fields were actually part of 1.7 concession amount. The rest of it, there was some talk of can we have some standard names or not. Things are not ratified yet, so that's still to be determined. But this is the amount of change we're talking about. So concessions, we had 209 MLSs with a field called concessions. And we had 53 other data providers that had something that was kind of like concessions that we ended up mapping to concessions all the way down. So concession amount, price, types. For us, we wanted to try to standardize as much as possible. That's a big part of the value proposition that we do at Constellation One. And so this became what we ended up with as our final list when it was all said and done. In order to do these fields, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, I think it's like 13 fields, we had those fields, and then we had this come in also.
Rick, is this a night test?
No, it's not a night test, but from a degree of change, all of these things represent 13 fields. So it gives you an idea from a client perspective. Ooh, don't do that. From a client perspective, it gives you an idea of what data looks like and why data standards and RESO are just so important to us, because this is what we work with. And so for every other technology provider out here, if you're working with data and you're working with MLS stuff, if you're creating a commissions thing, whatever tool you're working with, this is what you have to start with. So I'll open it up. So we don't normally do slides because it kind of looks like we're going to do the presenting as opposed to it being a joint session. So I'll take a pause here. Is there anybody else that'd like to chime in on any of the work they did to get through this?
They blocked it out of their minds by now.
This is always just, the toughest part is to get someone started, to get one person to raise their hand.
So I just wanted to say, John McKenna from Smarter Agent Keller Williams. Hello, everybody. Thank you for leading this. And this is really helpful. I have a document that's similar to this. One of the things that I just wanted to note is, as we started to see the data come out as well, we did not remove it from our schema because I do feel, there's a potential opportunity that things could get reversed. So we're trying to, hedge the bets in case things shift back in the future. If we see that data coming back, we didn't remove it entirely. And we haven't even really actually mapped this data yet because of all the product changes that are required to display it. So we've tabled it for now. I think we've gotten we work with about 420 MLSs, and I think we've got these fields and data from about 40 or so that we'll be looking to put in soon. But yeah, it's been a little challenging trying to kind of keep an eye on it, and not so much challenging from a work perspective, but the amount of chatter that comes through, right? When you have 400 plus MLSs, one change like that blows up an inbox pretty quickly. But I think we worked through it pretty good, and we'll get through it together.
All right. I think Bill's got his hand up.
First, I'm going to say something nice. I think RESO did a great job in regards of, your standard fields you put. Those are the ones they broadcast out, and a lot of the MLSs did follow that. Unfortunately, like you have here, a lot of them didn't. The other issue was a lot of them added a field, but never put any data in them.
True.
So that was a challenge where I'm like, hey, we got concessions. I tell our product people, I'm like, well, it's empty.
True. This is what we had to map because the notifications that came from the MLSs, the vendors said, hey, these are the changes to expect. Here's what the metadata is going to say. And so we went ahead, we mapped all this. It does not necessarily mean there are values for every single one of these. And that does vary for sure. We actually noticed that as well. But that's okay, that's fine. It has a placeholder. Things have a spot, so that's good. And if it ever comes in, we know what to do with it. All right. Any other thoughts or comments or questions on this particular topic? Who else had to work with this? I'd love to hear from some of the big guys, some of the vendors, on the amount of work this was for you, or any challenges you guys had, any lessons learned.
Ask twice. So many people reverted. Ask them twice before you do the work.
Okay. Fair enough. We did see that too. Data came in and then backed out. That did happen. But that's okay. Those are business decisions, and that's fine. All right. Well, we'll move on. I didn't want to kick us off with that. I thought it was an interesting one to kind of go through to see a good example of what the data looks like and what we work with and why RESO standards are so important. So now the floor is yours. That was my slides. So this is a pain point session. What are all the challenges and things that we can do better, and how can we help?
So I'm Chris with ICE. Along that same line, what you're showing with the fields, I think it is exponentially worse at the lookup level. And especially when you start operating at scale like you are, like Al, like what we see, the almost inability to be able to standardize a lot of that because we don't have the context. And what I mean by that is swim/tennis. Generally that slash you would interpret as an and. So this value is swim and tennis for an amenity. But then I get one that's pool/spa. And I don't know, is this a pool and a spa or a pool or a spa? And so since I don't know, I have trouble either splitting that or I have to just let that value go. And I see bloat in my metadata. In just a handful of MLSs, you start seeing just crazy bloat on your enumerations. And
so do you have to populate pool and spa as yes?
And that's the thing, is then it becomes an assumption, and if you populate pool and spa, but they actually mean it's pool or spa, you're wrong. I mean, just as much as you're right, potentially. And there was actually, not to pivot, but to slightly pivot, there was a great presentation earlier on, I'm totally blanking on the term, alignment of feeds, and augmenting the data, because that's one thing as we move to data dictionary out of whatever's native in the MLS, you lose a bit of data fidelity just by nature of it being translated. We can absolutely augment the data, but I think that it's tricky because me as a data user, depending on what my product is, the assumptions I would make off incoming data to augment it might be different than the assumptions next product would use. I might make an assumption that I'm okay being 50% right, 60% right, because it's not super important to my product, versus the next person, it might be crucial. And so, making sure, again, swinging back to the context, making sure that the data, if it doesn't provide the field directly, at least providing some context to help make those decisions to be more right than not when you're augmenting the data. That would be super helpful too.
Okay, go ahead.
I can answer.
Go ahead.
I think, first of all, I want to stand up. It's really blinding, this light. I want to give maybe a little bit of feedback, kind of background to that. I think when we see those combined fields, and I cannot stand those either, those are legacy fields that were defined tons of years ago, and every time we look at this data, it should be so great to split them. But what do we do with historical data? Because we cannot make this assumption, and at the moment it's important, and we just cannot, think of 5, 10 years later when eventually those records will age out. Nobody will really care about spa and pool, what was it, right? It's important at the moment. So it takes this kind of like transition time that we, and by we I mean MLSs, right, need to take and invest by maybe having several fields living, coexisting, pool/spa, pool/spa. Looks ugly, but only for a few years. And then later on, old fields will age out. But it's just, with all the other priorities, it's hard to address, but totally valid.
I know for us, we do standardization of data, right? We help brokers, franchises get a common feed so they can write code against it and they can create their products or websites. My biggest fear is always, I'm going to get it wrong. And so I'm going to advertise something that isn't true. And that's where that's so scary to me, because then you can start talking about misrepresentation and things like that. So anything with a slash is bad. I know all this stuff is legacy. The new dictionary does a much better job. So as you're migrating stuff over, it is super helpful to get away from that, because it really does create risk and problems for us to save, I guess, a field name. Mm-hmm. Now, you forgot to mention the main one, which is condo/townhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Try getting that one wrong.
Yeah. And then search is impossible also when the fields are combined.
Yeah, that's a super tough one. Whenever we see it, we have to make the phone calls, try to find somebody that can actually answer. What is it? How are agents doing it? And honestly, there isn't always an answer. Depends on the agent. Well, that makes it pretty hard to create a search experience that's accurate and meaningful.
Yeah.
It's a problem. So, this is as people migrate over and move towards a dictionary, it does start to solve a lot of these problems.
But isn't the concern, you lose value, right?
Mike is coming up.
I said, the concern is, like Olga said, those comps still have value, right? Even if you look at a house that may have sold 20 years ago, for certain business purposes, you may want to keep that stuff in your data. But maybe what we need to do sometimes as the MLSs is, do a better job of filtering our feeds. So, in some ways you can keep the MLS maybe stodgy a little bit or something, but the value of those old comps, and kind of, like Olga says, start kind of moving some of those cutoff dates forward. Mm-hmm. For you guys. The broker back office may want that old stuff, but your internet display layer, 2-3 years of sold is probably enough. So you've got to, I think, together we can find a way to, like private photos, right? Those kinds of things keep value for us as, that business to business MLS. And then, sometimes that kind of business to consumer should be maybe a little cleaner, but it doesn't have to be so deep. And that's what we found. Because, half of us standing up the API was cleaning up old data.
Yeah, I remember you've talked about that in the past,
yeah.
How much energy you guys spent trying to clean up the data, particularly historical data.
Right. Right, but, like you say, it may just belong in the MLS. And then it's a little more forgiving. It messes with your database, as you can imagine, but it has some business value for a multiple listing service to have that depth of data.
I think as product individuals need to solve problems and they get requests, I know vendors get asked to create custom fields, to really think through all the way down the chain and how it impacts is my ask. Obviously, it's not always going to be the case, and it has to be what it has to be sometimes, but it can be tough.
Hey guys, Amy Gianos with Domus Analytics, and tagging on to cleaning up the old data, current pet peeve is when there are defined RESO fields like concessions that we find in custom fields in the MLS. So they still have it assigned to some localized, and we have to go digging through and find it because it was mapped incorrectly. So that's one. A second one is that I'm seeing a lot of laziness where a lot of stuff is being thrown into the comments, and it'll say, see comments field for more. And it's like, thousands of characters long, and they're expecting us to parse out that information rather than putting it in those RESO fields that would make it easier for all the vendors to use.
So with the new testing, I'd be curious, I don't know, Al, you might be one to speak. How much of that gets cleaned up a little bit with the new testing? Everything being metadata aware. I think our standards are helping us a little bit, but there is still certainly value checking, value cleaning is certainly not occurring. But as far as having an actual true RESO data dictionary name being as a custom field, yeah, I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. Maybe the testing helps a little bit. Al, you got something to add?
Yeah, I would say some of that should be caught in the certification testing, and I think since so few have probably gone through that, I'm not seeing a lot of it yet. But I will say, somewhat related, the ability to request a retest of a certified vendor is going to be a lot stronger with 2.0. So if you're working with someone you feel like they're not giving you in the correct format, you reach out to RESO, reach out to Josh, and ask for a recert, and they will help you solve that problem.
Okay. It's good to know.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm with Data Master, and I have 2 pain points because we work with a very specialized audience in the appraisers, which I know you guys all love. But we have 2 problems, and the first one that we're looking for some help with is getting data payloads that have the appropriate fields that are needed for valuation. We struggle sometimes in getting the fields we need. And we also struggle with trying to set some standards around the appraisal data to bridge the gap from the RESO standard to the MISMO and UAD specs so that we can get that information over to the lenders to create the valuation reports and get the transaction completed.
Thank you for speaking up, Jennifer. Appraisers are our members. They pay the same dues as agents. They actually use less functionality because they don't list. They don't create listings. And I absolutely agree with you that we do not treat them as nicely, so to speak. But I think there is, Data Dictionary offers actually quite a few fields that could be used by appraisers. I mean, it's another story if MLSs adopted these fields and rolled it out into their systems, but room dimensions and things like that. And I don't know if you participate in Data Dictionary. Most of the people who do participate have real estate background with listing data, and perhaps we do not have a good, solid representation for like subject matter experts for what appraisers really need. So we could use your brain for that.
Does RESO have any kind of appraiser group?
We do. Actually, this is Greg Sachs.
I can't see.
I'm over here. We have an appraisal subgroup that's gone dormant, but it's still active. We were working on a payload of just appraisal fields. And we used to have a whole payloads work group, but now we've transitioned that into more of a subgroup type thing.
Nice.
So if there's an interest, this is where we find out if there's interest. We can bring that appraisal subgroup back up, pick up where we left off, and maybe get a payload going.
Awesome.
So one of the wonderful things that happens at RESO, Jennifer, is you bring up a pain point and you're automatically voluntold to be part of the solution. For those of you that don't know, when we started with pain points, I used to sit out there from the client side and complain. And then one day Sam's like, hey, Rick, how do you feel about heading the pain points group? So he took the complainer and put him up here. It was a brilliant move, brilliant move. But I think that's something we actually really could solve. An appraiser group within the dictionary, appraisal group would make a lot of sense. And there's already a bunch of work done. It seems like we just need to pick the ball up and keep running and get it over the finish line.
And now we have a work group chair from Data Master, so this is good.
Okay.
I just wanted to piggyback on something that she just mentioned about the contracts, getting, what access to the data you need for the products you're building And that's a pain point I wanted to surface just generally is we will subscribe to 1, 2, sometimes 3 different feeds from one source to get the information we need so we can get sold data, so we can get approved to do an AVM, so we can get the IDX public data feed. And then it's just really complicated to try to build a product that gives our agents a product that they can use for their clients, right? Like that's the goal of for us, is we want to build technology that empowers our agents to be more successful. And it's a little bit hard to do when you're struggling to get the information you need, and it varies, across from one MLS to another. So if anybody else could volunteer, I'd love to see like if there was a community where we could talk about like standardizing data agreements. I think that'd be really valuable, and maybe even thinking about how they're structured, because they're so complicated in certain different situations, and I don't understand why we would need anything more than a public and like a private type feed. So just wanted to throw that out there.
CMLS might have some resources that can help with that, I believe.
Yeah, I know that's been a topic that certainly has been brought up there many times, and it's personally, gotta stop doing that. We, as a company, also struggle with this. IDX means different things to different people, back office val, they all mean different things to different companies, and so it's on a case by case. That is one of the, it's not our standard, I don't think there's anything RESO per se can solve that one, it's more of a CMLS issue. But it is certainly a pain point. It is certainly a friction point. It is difficult on the client side. Traxi, I believe you wanted to say something?
Yes. Yeah, my name is PJ. I'm from Traxi. We are a deal management system for real estate agents. We are one of the reach companies for this year. So startup company, I'm going to lean in on the brave part, ask some stupid question probably. So a vendor like us who is new to this industry, where do we start? How do we get compliant? And what does the process look like to be RESO compliant?
I'm sorry, I could say that last part. I didn't catch it, to be honest.
So what does the process look like for a startup company like us to be RESO compliant?
Are you providing, depends what you're doing. So RESO compliant can mean a lot of things. Dictionary, API, in which aspect?
API.
So you're providing an API out?
Yes.
Basically,
you want to provide an API out.
You can go to certification.reso.org. You can reach out to Josh or anybody at RESO for a certification test. Josh has created a tester that you can basically run locally and validate if you're going to pass or fail. And before you even apply for anything, you can go through the process yourself. Your own engineers can do it. Test yourself out, back, forward, work out all the kinks until you're passing, and then just reach out. They'll do a test with you. And it's not more complex than that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Josh and team have done a great job investing in this.
I can piggyback on that too. If you're a tech vendor and not an MLS, that's what the RESO common format was supposed to help with, RCF. It's a way to do standardized data without going through the API structure.
That's true. So transport's part of it as far as data and all that, but if you have a RESO, an RCF, RESO compliant format data feed, that's also, you get certified for that as well. I think we saw earlier today, 2 vendors, the first 2 approved on that, is that correct? Or certified?
There have been several.
So yeah. Okay, over here I think somewhere?
Yeah, right. So I'm going to piggyback off a term that was used here as opposed to pain point, more of a pet peeve. But I also don't know if I'm talking to anybody in this room or everybody that would never be in this room. But you said all questions, and I like hearing my voice on a mic. So looking at your eye test as it got put up there, or looking at data whenever we work with another system that like we're trying to share data or we're mapping with another company in conjunction with them or something, there's a lot of native fields that maybe could be standardized one day, maybe we'd see in the data dictionary, but they are rife with either abbreviations, misspellings, shortenings, some other kind of thing like that, which makes it damn near impossible to find anything and actually see if there's any kind of existing consensus to begin with. Your list up there had 4 or 5 columns, and about 2/3 were abbreviated in some way. And like, if you dropped all of that and you dropped it all the way down to a column and a half, it'd be really easy to figure out who's using what. Because you have remarks, explanation, explanations, comments. There is all sorts of junk in there that doesn't need to be in there. And none of this, like, this is standardized, not stabilized. But if there was something that, you know, everybody could just do to help get things into the standard for future use, it would be just spelling words correctly. Refrigerator doesn't have a D in it, for instance, and I put a post just asking for a single enumeration, and we found out there were like 5,000 implementations that spelled the word refrigerator with a D. It's really hard to figure out what's going on if you're doing that kind of thing in your data. So,
Yeah.
like I said, it's a pet peeve, but it's a plea to, you know, spell things correctly and completely.
We see so much of this, and we also have to clean it up. Again, at the end of the day, the data it will end up someplace where a consumer can see it in most cases, right? And so that stuff does make a difference. If it's not coming out of the source system, then that is part of the work that, you know, John and the mapping team, they go through and they have to correct all that stuff. And it's a ton of coding. You have no idea how much work goes into actually doing that per MLS. It is a really big thing. Dictionary values do help with that, and obviously, as we continue to advance with the dictionary, that fully helps solve that. So I'll keep preaching the importance of being compliant with RESO and really using the dictionary because it helps so much with that.
There is one more thing that can help is actually, I think we have a library of synonyms, what I believe. Rob built or started building a long time ago, so by now it should be quite comprehensive, where it definitely helped us. And you can download it from RESO website. I mean, we did it maybe 3-4 years ago, it was still there, where for that one field, list price, you would think how many other variations of list price there could be. A lot. You could download various names that various systems call it, and it helps a little bit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this really comes into lookups. Things that are RESO compliant, the core RESO field value, that's pretty straightforward. Hopefully that's good. Dictionary 2.0 added a ton there. So that also might help standardize, clean that up as we see vendors and data providers move over to 2.0 and 2.1 somewhere down the road. I think that'll make a big difference there too.
So I wanted to add just a few quick notes, and then we'll get back to your questions and pain points just based on the conversation so far. Great question about the slashes in old legacy field names. We want to bring more convention to the dictionary, more things that we find. These slashes might have seemed easy early, and now we realize we lose fidelity of the data when we do things that way. So as granular as possible is kind of the goal, and not to have either or slashes in fields. There's a question about local fields that are actually standard fields. So we've worked, when you go through your Data Dictionary 2.0 certification, we worked with MLS Grid, Realtor.com, and Solid Earth on how they see all of these hundreds of thousands of local fields mapped into standard fields. So you'll see those suggestions as you go through that certification process. The system looks at the names of local fields and sees whether they seem like they're probably that standard field, but they're just slightly differently formed. And I think we have 5 or 6 companies certified on RESO Common Format. So back to the spiciness with Al.
All right, Al with CoreLogic. I'll preface this one with saying I don't have the answer, and I continue to encourage people to get involved with the work groups as much as possible. But I am starting to wonder if, and the third one is I hate Robert's rules, but that's mostly an aside. But I'm starting to wonder if we're at the point with some of these work groups where the current voting system is not serving us very well. We'll have some of these meetings where 80 people show up, most people haven't done the research, and we're just kind of there to be there. And it's a good place to get engaged, but I don't know that necessarily all of the conversations are as productive as they could be. So I was curious if other people are starting to see this or if there are ideas on ways to make it better. Leading up to this, I've been researching like consensus software, and there's not a lot, but just a way that you can give people a quick and easy way to get into the topic, learn the information at hand, make your own opinion, instead of just kind of showing up to the meeting and following your favorite person who's talking.
We have hands.
Oh, I'll go, since it's just a follow-up on that. It's not really a pet peeve or a pain point, but to follow up on that, for those that are in the work groups, I'm curious how many prior to the meetings are reading the Confluence posts and the follow-ups that people have on there. Can I see like raise of hands, not to call anyone out? Okay. So I think that would be a really important thing to do, and I'm guilty of it too sometimes, is to make sure that you're reading those Confluence posts and doing some of that homework ahead of time. And like I said, I'm totally guilty of it too sometimes. Thank you.
Yeah, it's certainly a tough problem to solve. I mean, you know, before a vote happens, there's a discussion, there's a process, things are posted way in advance, people are given the opportunity to read it. I know often they don't, and I've been guilty of it myself. You know, I come in, I get a quick 5-minute, 3-minute version of something, and I'm asked to vote. And sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. I have a feeling about it. But I see hands go up of people that I know. I'm like, you really don't know what you're voting on here. It is a real problem. I mean, it's kind of funny. You're chuckling, but it is actually a real issue. I don't know what the solution is. I jotted it down. I do jot this stuff down, and we do always go at the end of this. We always go back. We get together as a team, and we parse out all the different comments, all the suggestions. We figure out which work group they go to. We open tickets. And that, I think, is something that's worthy of a deeper conversation. I don't know what the solution is either, but you're not wrong.
I have a suggestion. Feed that to ChatGPT and summarize.
For the notes, great. For voting,
No, for the notes.
yeah.
So people have to read the summary.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
Can you repeat what you
Didn't
said?
get it at first. Now I got it. Now I'm with you. Okay.
I'm Kevin Colton, CTO at CMA Snap. We generate CMAs really on your phone, where you can, give it out in 8 seconds. Will RESO ever have an opinion on replicating at all in the future? It seems like there must be petabytes of data out there that's all just duplicated, and it seems like eventually going to be a liability. Or maybe an opinion on the querying features of an API to make sure you make full use of the OData API schema?
In general, it's a business decision. Your businesses will make those decisions, whether you want to replicate, whether you want to do live queries only. We want to support both, but members have said they want the ability to choose whether they replicate or whether they do live queries on systems. So it's a neutral position.
Yeah, but there's some out there that don't even let you query by address name or anything like that. You just have to query by the MLS ID if you already have it. So you would only have to replicate. The choice isn't there. You'd have to replicate to be able to search the API.
It would be great to look into that specific example. We'd be happy to do that with you.
Yeah. And then what about a centralized hosting database where you could just pay for usage, something like a Snowflake instance or something like that, where you could just query directly and just pay for what you need?
So that could be discussed in transport. I can jot that down. We actually are a Snowflake customer. And we do have instances where that's a model that we use, data share, Snowflake data share. It's a really great tool, but it's proprietary. It's not necessarily a standard, right? It's not open, you have to pay for it. So historically, RESO chooses to kind of stay away from that. Forcing people to use a particular technology provider is not really the best way. But it is an option. I think transport, my opinion, so this is just opinion now, am I going off? I think transport does need to look at really opening everything up. And they kind of did. That was the whole point of RESO Common Format, to make the transport irrelevant. As long as the structure is there, it's easy for people to work with. And whether that's streaming data, whether that's still data, whether it's any other model, I think there's probably a bunch of different things we can do in transport to kind of help modernize and push us forward. What we have is great, and standards are beautiful that way. I came up here a couple years ago and talked about webhooks, and there's a couple of certifications that are out there. It's got some traction, but I know on the biz dev side, it's what I hear the most. When people are instructed to poll, consumers don't like it. Our customers don't like it. So I do think that there's opportunity there to continue to grow this out further. You talked about replication. Again, that is just up to individual companies, how they want to service stuff. Do people want to build technology stacks that can support 5 million queries an hour? Do they not? It depends. Some companies, for business continuity reasons, need to have their own copy of data set to be able to protect their business. That makes sense. I know I have about 1.5 billion photos.
I'm going to stick
hosted in Amazon,
here, Rick.
And I think there's a lot of other people in here that also have a similar number of photos hosted. But again, it's kind of business choice. I don't know that there's a standard you can create there to say you have to offer replication, you have to pay for that, because Elasticsearch, OpenSearch, all these services, they're expensive.
Let's go to our transport chair.
Sure.
To speak to that.
Paul Stuziak, Falcon Technologies, Transport Workgroup Chair. I want to address at least two of the things that we just talked about here. The first one that we were just talking about is we've made a conscious effort to be agnostic about how the implementations are done. Those suggestions you've made are typically business decisions at the vendor and MLS level, and we want to leave them there. So in some cases, they're going to be saying, you call us too often. We're having that discussion around the way days on market can be calculated and having a more reliable way to deliver days on market to the consumers of it, and also reducing the load on the servers. So that's happening right now. Back to somebody over here who was about Confluence pages. In transport, we've taken another step in doing the discussion. So we start with a discussion, get plenty of people talking about it, saying, yes, we're interested, no, we're not interested. Then it goes into actually a proposal. Hopefully, again, everybody reads all of the material, because eventually they'll have to implement it. And only then, when we've gone through these several steps and processes where we've had lots of chance to review and discuss this, and it will impact the people who are on those calls, so they do tend to pay attention, do we take it to a vote? And so sometimes the vote is like, yep, okay, we're all done, because we've spent 4 months, 6 months, a year getting to this point. Everybody's weighed in on it, and now we're just stamping it and pushing it out the door. So we are trying to tackle some of the pain points that you're directly discussing today, including replication versus live query. There's a proposal that we're going to talk a little bit about for certification, where we're talking about live queries. We've had requests to be able to do certified and endorsement for your querying against the server. Historically, most people have wanted to replicate because servers are hard to keep up. And if your business depends on data and the main server's down, you have a problem. So historically, people have replicated. That's not true as much now, although people still replicate. You can live query against a lot of systems, and it's a good way to do it because you're getting the freshest data. But we are trying to address some of those things, including stepping a little bit away from, as Rick was mentioning, from being so tightly tied to OData as the only way you can get information out of the system, trying to do it with the shape of the data. Webhooks are coming in as well. We've got several proposals that have already been adopted and some improvements to those adopted proposals based on people implementing it and coming back and going, well, it's almost right. Here's what we found when we did it. Here's how we propose to fix that going forward. So we're really taking what I think is a proactive approach to trying to address some of the concerns of the industry, the vendors in the industry, the MLSs in the industry. I'd encourage you to attend some transport meetings, some certification meetings, and see what's going on, read the discussion posts in GitHub, and see what we're talking about, because some of those will be points that you might have valid input on that we're looking for. We're looking for more people to say, yeah, but. So please take some time and have a look at that. And I'll stop talking now.
And again, I can't stress enough the value of RESO common format. I really think it's the future. It's so important. It does really free up on the technology side, ability to do a lot of different things with just RESO common format.
Bill Boyer with Sync. I'm going to go over to data shares now as an issue. Again, RESO did a great white paper about it, but it doesn't, and it really addresses a lot of the MLS concerns. It does not really address the data consumer concerns in regards of a company such as myself, where if I'm dealing with 5 different MLSs in California, I have to download that data 5 different times from each MLS in the exact same listing. And again, each state, each MLS is, of course, handling a difference on how that licensing goes, but there is a lot of duplication of downloading the images, the listing data, which costs people money, costs us money, and I would love to see something happen with that.
Guilty.
Don't forget agent IDs and agent lists that are...
Oh yeah, there's lots of those things too where the agent IDs don't match up too, but yeah.
I think, Bill, completely valid concern. And when we embarked on our data share, the whole motivation was to have that common feed that we can give to vendors from our entire data share, and you don't have to go to different people, different MLSs to download it, 5 times. We're figuring out various business rules and what gets displayed and what doesn't, and we have our own issues with that. What we are finding, if let's say MLSListings data goes to a vendor, not necessarily you, but some other data subscribers through another MLS, meaning through their technology partner, that may not be respecting our business rules, right? Display rules, and the vendor that consumes the data also may not be respecting all the business rules. That's where things get lost, and that's where we have issues that we are still resolving. Because at the end of the day, agent doesn't care how the listing ended up on this website, through which vendor and through which channel. All they care, something is not displayed correctly. Who do they call? Us, right? So we're still figuring out these things, and hopefully we will eventually.
Yeah, and I understand that. There are some MLSs that have data shares that's only on the MLS side and not on the IDX side. And we, of course, we get calls about, why is this listing not on my site? But it's because they get it from a data share. That's easy to explain, but yeah, I definitely understand the business side of that.
I think just making sure, too, in any data share that there really are methodologies and ways to understand who the source was really clearly, including on the member of the office side, because we've run into some struggles there where we don't know this agent is part of which organization. And I'm not saying that's the Bay Area, but we have seen it in other...
It is hard because it's very hard to identify an agent and dedupe and reconcile all these records. There is no APN assigned to a person. And whatever is assigned to a person is a private information that we don't want to utilize. So,
is universal licensing, is that coming up tomorrow? Is there still more discussions going on there on agent licensing?
You're live.
Update tomorrow?
Good. Maybe.
There's lots of us watching that.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Brady with Dorify. So I've got a question. We have a situation where in our database source of truth, we have certain parts of our listings that have changed. The data has actually been updated, but the modification timestamp, which would cause downstream syncs, has not been updated. I've thought about a solution to include a hash on the listing, such that you could do a full replication sync of just the ID, just the hash, and potentially compare that to sync data. But it's an issue that we're facing currently, and obviously thoughts.
That's one of my favorite solutions. We do that.
I love this.
Yep. We do that in Trestle. I love it.
That's actually a really good idea.
We call ours record signature just because checksum might throw some people off. But yeah, it changes no matter what. We have an internal timestamp as well. But yeah, I'm 100% on board. I love the idea with relying on something other than mod timestamp.
So then the question becomes, does it become a standard where anybody could actually create that hash out of that same data set?
Probably not, I would say. Like, I mean, there might be a standard to have a unique value that changes every time you update it, and it could even be, yeah, I mean, it could even be a hashed version of an internal timestamp that you're not passing out externally. But yeah, the number of people who cry when you update 100,000 listings is pretty darn high.
So there, I mean, there are some valid use cases there where, you know, some lookups change, something has changed, you've added something, but you really don't want to blast, you know, 100,000 records to people. Or, you know, if you're going backwards, including sold history, you know, someone's looking to do an incremental record in the middle of the day, they just want to get what's new, and all of a sudden they get 350,000 changes, and you've completely basically brought their site stale for the next however hours it takes for them to actually get all that in, processed, everything else. So I know there are reasons, and there are valid scenarios where you don't quite update the timestamp when the change occurs, and you sort of update 10,000 at a time over a period of time, and then slowly it catches itself up. But the hash idea is actually really good. It's a really good idea. That would help a lot in solving that. And if somebody wants to, you know, make that change, then it's on them. Yeah. John?
Yeah, so John from Constellation. One little pet peeve would be, for me personally, a lot of the newer web API implementations continue to have little idiosyncrasies with authentication, whether it's a custom header value you have to pass, or something else like that. And so our web API client code just continues to get more and more complicated to maintain. But related to that is also the fact that as a technical person, I can use Postman to experiment and figure out how to do queries against different systems. But for some of our more administrative people, who are far less technical, doing that kind of thing isn't really practical. And so we have technical staff who are constantly asked to check listing data directly in the MLS, and we end up often using Postman. So in the old days with RETS, we'd use RETS Connector, which continues to be a useful tool. But we don't really have an equivalent for that for Web API. We don't have a easily used internal desktop GUI or anything like that we can give to people on our staff. I'm sure this is a common problem with many companies. And I wonder, originally, years ago, RESO had put some code out for a rudimentary Web API client, if I remember. I wonder if anyone feels there would be a role for RESO to do something like that again, or maybe there's a vendor out there, or a company that has a very sophisticated client that already takes into account all the idiosyncrasies of the various systems that would be willing to open source that, or what people's thoughts are on this topic. Because
Olga, anything you want to add to that?
I don't know, either you read my mind or you hacked my presentation. We were just talking about that. Completely agree. At my MLS, we have engineering team, so when CS gets a call from an agent, how come my listing is not at Zillow? Zillow says, you guys don't have it. You know, the customer service agent cannot help. They don't know, they cannot query API and confirm whether it's been exposed, if the timestamp has been updated. So it goes to engineering team and they get disrupted and they have to troubleshoot. And we have our partners that we data share with that also share this concern with us that they're completely helpless in this kind of situation. And it's really important, obviously, that any data update goes out immediately, right, for an agent, for the seller, price changes, photo changes. So our CS, when they're on the phone, they don't have time to solve technical issues, and they're not empowered, they don't have ability to do that. If all they need is to figure out, you know, each step where the data changes hands, quickly see, is the change here? It's not. Is it here? It's not. And they're not enabled to do that. So a simple tool, with RETS, it was actually quite easy. Depending on RETS implementation, you could query through browser. But with API, it's pretty technical. And you're absolutely right, Postman is not the solution for non-technical.
So show of hands.
Yeah.
Are there people that would really love to see this? Is this a common problem? Is this something that would help people?
Actually, we at Realtina, we were planning to announce this after RESO conference that we are ready to open source our React web interface. So everybody is free to use it, and it's 100% compliant with RESO Web API.
Yay.
I think this is the shortest ever time when the pain point was addressed.
That's it. I was going to say.
If I can add,
you shall receive.
It's like a record conference, record attendance, record time in solving issues.
Killing it.
If I could add one note to that as well, because that's wonderful. Any of our members who want to open source tools like that, like a web client, that's fantastic. Yeah. We're just having this discussion in the work groups and the board as well. And so we want to keep, while we've got you here, get that feedback. Do your folks want to work with a web client? Do they want to work with a desktop client? Depending on their technical capabilities, how simplified does this tool need to be for your administrative staff to work with that? And we'd love to get that feedback while you're here.
Okay. And I'll add to that solution for you guys. I'm Susie Bard from Domi. I'm one of the founding partners and CSO at Domi. And about 7 years ago, and north of $5 million, we set out to create a mobile app. About a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, the private company that we created the app for was bought out by a big box company who said, we got Zillow, we don't need that. So we have a mobile app that has done a lot of what you were talking about. It's fully integrated. It has a consumer version where consumers can connect to the agent's IDX feed and browse privately and not be sold. It has a pro partnership version where agents can share a pro working version and receive leads from their consumers on the app. And of course, it has the realtor version that keeps them compliant, safety. We have criminal background search. We've done all of the stuff. It's got over 100 productivity tools in it, and I think I finally found my people because we've been trying to figure out since October of last year when we went nationwide, how the app could possibly fit in because we've done a lot of the work that you're talking about. It is not a desktop app. It's not something that works on computers. It's a mobile on-the-go app for realtor safety, forms compliance, with sign with a finger to give that agency disclosure, all of that. So we're willing to work with every single association in MLS, and here's the part that's great about that. Our app is free to you and your members. So we make money by selling AI predictive prospect leads, and we even have a revenue share.
We do need to focus on pain points right now and not products and features. So
I'm sorry, but what I was saying is that if
I want to give these folks the last few minutes here to talk about pain points issues, and we've got another one here.
Yeah, my name is Patrick. I'm with ZenList, and I just wanted to bring up a pain point that we've been experiencing with days on market. For some MLSs with the RESO API, we get a days on market that we want to present accurately in our product, but not always does the days on market get updated every single day. So what happens is we have a stale days on market that might say, for example, 28 days, 31 days after the listing was made active. I'm curious what other people have done or considered to solve this pain point, and if there's a way for that to be included in the RESO standard.
I think Sergio might have an answer.
Yeah, Sergio, Paul, I think you guys have been working a lot on this, right? I think you have the right audience.
Yeah, there's a discussion that we just started in transport that actually is trying to address that, where there's going to be, we're talking about doing is it active and when it was last calculated, and then you can do some math on the client side to make sure it's correct. It just started a little while ago, so attend transport, and hopefully we'll get that resolved in the next short time.
Historically speaking, it's been a topic that's come up quite a few times. You may occasionally see a T-shirt regarding it, how to do that math. It has been a problem. It is a challenging bit. And then to download it, do you want to download all that data every day? Can you increment to yourself? I think recently there's been a couple really interesting methodologies that might work. I would advise, please join the next transport meeting and let's walk through the use case that you have, what you're seeing, and see if this matches. Because somebody did just present some new ideas to this in transport. Perfect. All right.
Everyone, Adam Beckerman at Compass. I'll just speak to what we did there. We capture the last sync time, and then we add from now to that last sync time to whatever the value was when we last got it. So maybe that'll help some of you. We have a challenge, which is the multitude of ways in which the same concept is represented throughout the data dictionary. We saw the spaces total and parking total and garage spaces example earlier. We tried to add a waterfront property filter to our search interface, and there's no less than 3 ways to identify a property as being waterfront. There's at least 2 ways to identify a split level. There's 2 ways to identify if the master or primary bedroom is on the main floor. I don't have the answer. I'd love to see ways to simplify and compact dictionary in those cases where we can find a single primary way that we can all agree to reflect some of these concepts, attributes about homes.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Somebody clapping?
We just completed a waterfront subgroup where we've defined and cleaned up a lot of that waterfront stuff. So that goes back to going into the Confluence and reading what we did. And those fields have been adjusted and added for the next version of Data Dictionary, right, Jason?
Yeah, we'll talk about it tomorrow during Data Dictionary if you attend. So that group just wrapped up like last month or the month before that. That was the primary focus, was getting rid of that duplication for waterfront and water features and that kind of stuff.
Have you by chance gone through and done any research on that to see the extent of how you would view that, how big of a problem it is for you? Just curious.
Mike.
It's like an analyst could go through and kind of come up with their own ways, and I would imagine, your website's huge enough, you may have already had somebody do some of this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of what we're having to do. Every time we want to add a new search filter, we have to comb through, about 60% of our feeds right now are RESO feeds. We have about 200 integrations nationwide. The other 40% are RETs, and of course, finding these concepts in the RETs data looks like your eye test a little bit. So it's really the pace at which we can add search filters is limited by how quickly we can find where all the data exists. So
I would ask if anybody's actually done that research from an analyst perspective of, hey, these all kind of mean the same thing, and would be willing to share some of that information, and we could introduce that into dictionary. We could introduce that as future work and ideas and things we could go fine tune and improve on. So I just don't know that anybody's actually done that work fully end to end, but if so, I would love to hear it. I'd love to see it. It'd be super helpful. Because that is a common pain point, we all feel it. Very true. All right. That's a pretty good run, guys. That's not too bad. Yeah. What else do we have? Pain points. I thought I was going to see this one, but I haven't heard it yet. It's kind of been mentioned, but not quite. Olga, you want to talk about this one for a minute? Because I did hear it in an earlier presentation as well. You want to talk about this?
You left it to the very end, huh?
I have time. We could still be here for a while, so.
Well, I think, was it Matt Hendricks from Zillow said in the previous presentation that adopting just half the standard does not work, right? 50% doesn't work. So this is similar situation here where the standard is only good as its adoption. And I stood on similar stage spring 2023 with Greg and Hud, and we talked about how RESO helped us solve our main headache of the day, that agents go into the system and remove pictures after sale. right? And RESO does have a really robust standard to address this problem, which is permission flag on media resource. Very simple. It's either private or it's public. And our MLSs went through trouble of implementing this standard. We did massive outreach to our agents, trained. Oh, I see heads going like that. Very good. 78 MLSs in the room, by the way. We are not the only ones who have the problem. So I don't have to explain that removing photos is bad. Appraisers suffer, CMAs suffer. It's not good. The reason they do that is at the buyer request. A new owner of the house does not want those pictures online. So that was the motivation for private-public flag. And we had really good, actually, success with it, right? About the numbers went down of listings that are affected. We started with like 5-7%. It went down. We're back up 2 to 4% of listings still get requested to remove photos. Why? Because our downstream vendors have not adopted the standard. Many have, and thank you, you're in the room, I know who you are. Thank you for putting it on your roadmap and respecting this rule and hiding photos if it says private, but many have not. And I think one of the, by the way, big portals, small website providers, big brokers, small brokers. So, and I think one of the problems, I mean, besides the fact that seller wish is not respected, property owner wish is not respected, one of the problems is that they lose confidence in us, right? We tell them, just go and choose the flag, set it to private, you're covered. And they come back and say, no, I went to this website and photos are still there. So just certifying data dictionary is not always enough, in my opinion. There are some really sensitive fields that represent rules, right, that we should be maybe testing somehow for as well. I mean, there is no way for our compliance team to go and audit thousands of websites. No way. So maybe we can figure out some other way of enforcing this kind of rules. Okay, 78 MLSs. Show me your hands if you've heard this issue before. Okay.
Quite a few.
2 hands.
Quite a few. So yeah, I mean, it's a good reminder for everybody that's on the other side of the data to make sure that this is actually being honored. And to go check for it. I think it got added later on, and the rule just never got added by some people. But I agree, I know that's a real problem. And the only solution I can think of is really just outreach, like you just did right now, reminding people this is really critical. And it's a legal issue too. It's a liability issue. And nobody likes it when you get your feed turned off, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Continue. Okay. And with that, I think we will call this
for drinks.
I think we'll call this adjourned. I appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you guys so very much.